The cold, dense air of Sci-Fi carried an eerie silence, broken only by the occasional distant roar of some unseen beast. The planet was a nightmare-given form, a place where nature had crafted only killers. Towering trees with twisted, gnarled roots reached for the sky like grasping fingers, their thick canopies shrouding the land in permanent twilight. The ground trembled beneath unseen movements, the weight of colossal creatures stalking the land, hunting anything that dared breathe. The small alien research team moved cautiously, their sleek environmental suits humming softly as they scanned their surroundings. They were not warriors, nor were they fools. Sci-Fi was infamous, a planet so hostile that even the war-hardened reptilian warriors of the Dravkan Empire avoided it. It was said that the apex predators here had never known fear, for nothing in their environment had ever been capable of challenging them. And yet, something was wrong. The team leader, a thin, four-armed scientist named Velener, stopped abruptly. His secondary arms twitched as he adjusted the sensors on his forearm display, his large, reflective eyes narrowing at the readings. Something massive had been killed nearby. Not just killed, torn apart. Velener gestured for silence. The others obeyed instantly, their bodies tense as they followed his gaze. The readings were unmistakable, fresh biological remains. Something had been recently slaughtered, and not by accident. They moved forward, their boots making no sound on the thick, damp moss beneath them. The stench of blood grew stronger, mixed with the pungent scent of burning flesh. When they finally reached the clearing, their minds struggled to comprehend what they were seeing. A corpse lay before them, a hulking beast that had once been the dominant predator of this region. Its armored hide was shredded, its massive, serrated fangs cracked and broken. Deep claw marks lined its thick flesh, but what was most horrifying was its missing limbs. Hacked off with precision, the exposed bone gleaming in the dim light. Beyond the corpse, shapes moved. Velener's heart pounded as he raised his visor's magnification. There, gathered around a roaring fire, were creatures unlike any they had ever encountered in the galaxy. Their bodies were covered in strange, flexible armor, crude compared to the sleek technology of the galactic races. Their movements were unhurried, calm, like apex predators that feared nothing. And then he saw it, the thing that would haunt his nightmares for the rest of his days. One of them, a creature with pale skin and dark, shaggy hair, reached into the fire and pulled out a roasted slab of meat. He grinned, revealing sharp teeth, and bit into the flesh of the fallen predator, chewing thoughtfully as if he were sampling a delicacy. Another one, this one taller, with strange markings on his arms, held up a severed claw as if it were a trophy. He laughed, slamming it against a rock until it cracked open, revealing the tender meat inside. The others joined in, tearing into the remains of the beast that had once ruled this world. Velener's breathing became shallow. He had studied thousands of apex species across the galaxy. He had seen creatures that could swallow ships whole, beings that lived only to kill and consume. But none of them, none, had ever done this. For the first time in his life, he felt true, bone-deep terror. They weren't just predators. They were something worse. They were humans. The Galactic Council Chamber was a grand structure, carved from the core of a dying star, its walls pulsing faintly with residual cosmic energy. Representatives from 100 different species sat in a semicircle, their eyes, or whatever sensory organs they possessed, focused on the trembling figure in the center. Velener stood before them, his forearms clasped tightly together in a desperate attempt to stop his body from shaking. The images he had recorded on Sci-Fi flickered on the massive display behind him, each frame more horrifying than the last. The council chamber was silent. No one spoke. No one moved. Even the normally volatile representatives of the Dravkan, the galaxy's fiercest warrior race, were motionless, their scaled faces unreadable. At last, a voice broke the silence. "You mean to tell us," said High Chancellor Orelvax, his shimmering golden exoskeleton catching the dim light, "that these," Humans not only survived on Xyphos 9, but actively hunted its apex predators. Velenar swallowed hard. Yes, Chancellor. Not just hunted. They consumed them. A ripple of unease passed through the assembly. Consuming another predator was unnatural. Apex species did not eat other apex species. It was an unspoken rule of the galaxy. Even the deadliest carnivores had their limits. There were creatures even they knew not to challenge. But humans, they did not recognize such limits. This must be an anomaly, muttered a feathered delegate from the Volcari Dominion, her iridescent wings twitching nervously. A rogue group, perhaps. Maybe they were stranded, forced to survive through desperate means. Velenar shook his head. I thought so too. Until I accessed galactic records. Reports from other death worlds show the same pattern. Humans arrive. Humans hunt. Humans eat the most dangerous creatures they can find. And then they move to the next world and do it again. The chamber erupted into chaos. This is absurd. A thick-shelled Korak bellowed, his voice like grinding stone. No species behaves this way. They must be stopped. A gelatinous envoy from the Yev era gurgled, his translucent form shifting wildly. They threaten the balance of nature itself. Perhaps we are misunderstanding them, said a reptilian diplomat from the Dravkin Empire, his tone cautious. Are they attempting to dominate the food chain? Velenar hesitated. That was the question that had kept him awake ever since he had witnessed the horror on Xyphos 9. It was not normal behavior. It was not survival instinct. Humans did not just consume. They conquered through consumption. That is what I fear, Velenar admitted. They do not just kill for food. They seek out the strongest, the most dangerous, as if it is a challenge. They take trophies, not for study, but for amusement. They laugh as they consume creatures that have terrorized worlds for millennia. The chamber fell into a stunned silence once more. If this is true, the High Chancellor said gravely, then we are witnessing something unprecedented. No species has ever attempted to claim the top of every ecosystem it encounters. A cold realization settled over the assembly. If humans could consume the apex predators of death worlds, what else could they consume? Orelvax's voice dropped to a whisper. Are they testing themselves? Preparing for something? More? No one dared answer. Finally, a decision was made. The Galactic Council could not afford to ignore this threat. If the humans truly sought to make the entire galaxy their hunting ground, then action had to be taken before they turned their sights on something far worse than beasts. Before they turned their sights on civilized species. A fleet was dispatched. It was not an army, not yet. Just an expedition to investigate, to make contact, to see firsthand what humanity was becoming. But deep down, every species in the council chamber knew the truth. They were already too late. The fleet arrived at the edge of a world so hostile that even the most battle-hardened species in the galaxy had deemed it uninhabitable. The planet, designated VX-32, was a place where nature itself had seemingly decided that survival was a privilege, not a right. Towering mountains of obsidian rock loomed over valleys filled with toxic rivers, their waters bubbling with chemical reactions violent enough to melt steel. The air carried the distant howls of creatures whose evolutionary purpose seemed to be nothing more than to kill and feed. And yet, somewhere on this planet, humans thrived. The lead vessel, Vornek's Wrath, descended cautiously, its hull reinforced with layers of energy shielding. The crew on board, a mixed force of soldiers and researchers, watched their scanners closely. Their mission was simple: locate the humans, make contact, and determine the extent of their madness. But the sensors detected something odd. Life signatures flickered across the planet's surface, but not where they should be. The apex predators of VX-32, massive creatures that had never known defeat, were missing from their usual hunting grounds. The balance of the ecosystem had been disrupted in a way that defied explanation. A transmission came through from one of the scouting ships. The voice of the pilot was shaking. We found them. The coordinates were transmitted, and the fleet followed, cutting across the storm-filled sky, lightning flashing across their hulls. As they neared the designated location, they saw the smoke first, dark plumes rising from a massive clearing in the jungle. Then came the heat signatures, clustered together in a way that suggested something was gathered there. When the fleet's cameras zoomed in, what they saw defied all logic. A village, if one could even call it that, had been built among the ruins of what was once a predator's den. Massive bones had been repurposed into fences, sharpened into spears, and even carved into crude furniture. Fires burned brightly, their flames licking at the charred remains of something enormous. The humans were there, laughing, drinking, feasting. They were eating the creatures of VX-32. The fleet's commander, a hardened warrior of the Dravkan Empire named Jekthar, narrowed his reptilian eyes. He had seen countless battles, had fought against creatures that could tear through ships with their claws, but never had he seen a species treat apex predators like mere livestock. He opened a direct transmission. "This is Commander Jekthar of the Galactic Council Expeditionary Fleet," he announced, his voice projected through the fleet's powerful speakers. "Humans, explain yourselves." The laughter below did not stop. Instead, one of the humans, a female, tall and broad-shouldered, her arms scarred from battles unknown, stood and looked directly into one of the fleet's observation drones. Her face was illuminated by the firelight, her eyes gleaming with amusement. "Explain what?" she called back. "Dinner." The other humans chuckled, tearing into their meals with sharp teeth. They were not alarmed, not frightened, not even curious. They acted as though the arrival of a galactic fleet was nothing more than an inconvenience. Jekthar clenched his jaw. This was not how first contact was supposed to go. The fleet outgunned them, outnumbered them, and yet the humans showed no fear. "These creatures you are consuming," Jekthar continued, trying to keep his voice steady, "are the apex predators of this world. They have dominated this planet for thousands of cycles. And you hunt them like they are common beasts." The human woman shrugged. "We eat what we kill. That's how it works, doesn't it?" "That is not how it works," a voice from the fleet's council-appointed envoy, a Yevera diplomat, interjected. His gelatinous form quivered in distress. "There are rules to nature, to the hierarchy of predators. Even the most fearsome hunters of the galaxy respect those limits." The human woman tilted her head, as if considering the words. Then she grinned. "If we can eat them," she said slowly, deliberately, "we can beat them." Silence. Jekthar exhaled sharply through his nostrils. The words were spoken so casually, so confidently, yet the weight behind them was undeniable. These were not mindless brutes. They were not scavengers or desperate survivors. They were something else entirely. The humans did not fear predators. They became them. And worse, they found amusement in it. Jekthar knew, in that moment, that the Galactic Council had made a mistake. They had come here thinking they were investigating a curious anomaly, something that needed to be understood, perhaps even contained. But what they had truly discovered was a new apex species. And the galaxy was not ready. The jungle of VX-32 trembled as the hunt began. Towering trees, their trunks thick as warships, loomed over the battlefield, their canopy casting deep shadows over the damp, moss-covered ground. Somewhere in the distance, the earth rumbled with the movements of unseen behemoths. The predators of this world were restless. Something unnatural was happening. The Galactic Council fleet had landed in full force, deploying an elite hunting unit composed of warriors from across the galaxy. These were the finest hunters, the most highly trained trackers, and the deadliest fighters each species had to offer. They wore advanced exosuits equipped with cloaking devices, energy lances, and bioscanners capable of detecting the faintest movements. The challenge had been simple: a hunt. The humans had laughed at the idea. They didn't use cloaking devices, they didn't have advanced tracking drones, and they certainly didn't have the Council's hyper-tech weaponry. Yet they had agreed without hesitation. Now both sides moved through the jungle, searching for their prey. Jekthar, the Dravkan commander, crouched low against the underbrush, his forked tongue flickering out as he tasted the air. His squad fanned out behind him, each one moving with precise, disciplined efficiency. Their target was a sky maw, a beast that soared above the jungle, descending like a shadow of death to snatch anything foolish enough to enter its domain. It was one of the deadliest creatures on VX-32, a nightmare even for the best hunters. Jekthar had killed one before. It had taken 5 of his strongest warriors, an ambush, and a barrage of plasma fire to bring it down. Even then, the creature had fought until its last breath, nearly taking Jekthar's arm with it. He doubted the humans had ever faced something like this before. Then, a rustling sound came from the nearby foliage. Jekthar motioned for silence. His squad froze. Something was moving toward them. Through the thermal scanner on his visor, he detected a heat signature approaching fast. But it wasn't the sky maw. It was human. Jekthar narrowed his eyes. The humans were supposed to be hunting their own prey. Why would one be approaching them? A figure emerged from the underbrush, stepping into view. It was one of the humans, a male, wearing simple combat gear, his face streaked with dirt and sweat. He held a crude-looking spear over his shoulder, but his posture was relaxed, casual, as if he wasn't concerned about being surrounded by elite alien warriors. Jekthar tensed, raising his weapon. "You are interfering with our hunt, human." The man grinned. "Oh, I'm not interfering. I'm just watching." Jekthar's tongue flicked out again. There was something off about the way this human spoke. There was no arrogance, no hostility, only amusement. The human turned his head slightly, glancing toward the sky. "You're hunting the sky maw, right?" Jekthar's grip on his weapon tightened. "Yes. What of it?" The human pointed upward. "Well, I'd move if I were you." Jekthar's instincts screamed at him, but before he could react, a shadow passed overhead. The sky maw struck with terrifying speed, its massive, talon-lined wings slicing through the air like razors. Jekthar barely managed to roll aside as the beast descended. It screeched so loud it made his eardrums throb. The hunting squad scattered, weapons firing in every direction. Energy blasts burned through the air, but the sky maw was too fast. It was too strong. Jekthar turned toward the human, expecting him to be running for cover. Instead, the man was laughing. Then, in a blur of movement, the human threw his spear. It should have been impossible. The sky maw was too high, too agile. But the moment the spear left the human's hand, it whistled through the air like a missile, striking the beast directly in the eye. The sky maw shrieked in agony, its flight faltering as blood sprayed from the wound. It crashed into the jungle with a deafening thud, its massive body crushing trees beneath its weight. The ground shook as the predator twitched, its life fading. Jekthar could only stare. The human stepped forward, retrieving his spear from the dying beast. He crouched down, placed a hand on the sky maw's head, and muttered something under his breath. A silent thanks, not to the gods, but to the creature itself. Then, with a practiced motion, he pulled a knife from his belt and began carving into the sky maw's flesh. Jekthar finally found his voice. "How?" The human glanced up. "You used cloaking devices, sensors, plasma weapons. I just watched. I learned. I waited." He grinned. It was kinda fun. Jekthar's blood ran cold. The humans were not hunting with technology. They were not relying on tools. They were using instinct, patience, experience, all things that the greatest predators of the galaxy were supposed to possess. But humans weren't just predators. They were something worse. They were hunters who enjoyed the challenge. The jungle of VX-32 was quieter than it should have been. Apex predators that once roamed freely, ruling this unforgiving land with their raw power, had begun to retreat. It was not because of any natural shift in the ecosystem. It was because of the humans. Jekthar stood at the edge of the human encampment, watching them with an uneasy gaze. His squad had returned after the hunt, shaken. They had seen what the humans were capable of, and for the first time in his life, Jekthar felt something he had never associated with an inferior species. Respect. No, that wasn't the right word. Fear. The human hunters sat around their fires, eating, laughing, sharing stories of their kills. Their trophies, clawed skulls, fangs the size of blades, thick hides that could withstand plasma fire, were displayed like decorations. They had done in weeks what no species had done in centuries. They had tamed VX-32 through sheer will, determination, and hunger. Jekthar's claws twitched against his belt. Every instinct told him that these creatures should not exist. There were rules to how the galaxy worked. Apex predators ruled their territories. Weaker creatures feared them. That was the order of things. But the humans had flipped the hierarchy. A movement to his right caught his attention. One of the human hunters, a younger male, stood up and stretched, rolling his shoulders before picking up a long knife. His gaze swept across the alien visitors, locking onto Jekthar. "You look tense," the human said, smirking. "Not used to seeing people eat things that could have eaten them, huh?" Jekthar straightened, his scales rippling with agitation. "It is unnatural," he admitted. "No species hunts apex predators for sport." The human chuckled. "That's where you're wrong. On Earth, we don't just fight predators. We dominate them." Jekthar's jaw tightened. Apex predators cannot be dominated. They exist at the top. They adapt. They kill. The human's grin widened. "Yeah, so do we." Without another word, the human turned and walked toward a massive slab of meat roasting over a fire. With a practiced motion, he sliced a chunk from it, lifted it to his mouth, and took a bite. Jekthar recognized the scent instantly. His stomach clenched. It was the sky maw. The very creature that had once ruled the skies of VX-32, an apex predator that had taken hundreds of alien warriors to bring down in past encounters, was now being roasted over an open flame like it was nothing more than livestock. Jekthar felt his warriors shift uneasily behind him. They, too, had realized the truth. The humans were not just surviving. They were thriving. They were replacing the apex predators. The human took another bite, chewing thoughtfully before speaking again. "You know what the best part is?" he asked, looking around at the gathered aliens. "It's not just about the food. It's about the challenge." Jekthar narrowed his eyes. "The challenge." The human nodded. "You see, hunting things weaker than you. That's boring. But hunting things that think they're stronger than you." He grinned, sharp and wolfish. "Now that's fun." Jekthar inhaled sharply. They weren't hunting to survive. They were hunting to prove a point. The realization sent a chill through him. This was no accident. This wasn't about humans adapting to new worlds. This was about domination. Jekthar turned to his second in command, a veteran warrior named Krethful. The older soldier had fought in more battles than most in the Galactic Council, yet now his eyes were filled with the same unease that Jekthar felt. "They are more dangerous than we believed," Krethful muttered in their native tongue. Jekthar didn't respond. He didn't need to. The hunt had not been a test for the humans. It had been a message. And the galaxy was starting to understand it. Jekthar had seen many wars, had stood on countless battlefields where civilizations clashed for dominance. He had faced the worst the galaxy had to offer: beasts that could tear through ships, assassins that moved like shadows, warlords who conquered entire star systems. But never had he encountered a species like humanity. The Council fleet had remained stationed above VX-32 for weeks, observing, studying, and debating. The humans, however, did not seem to care. They went about their hunts, tracking and killing creatures that even the most battle-hardened warriors dared not face. They carved through the food chain with precision and ease, making a game of what should have been a desperate fight for survival. Worse still, they were learning. Jekthar had watched in disbelief as humans adapted their tactics. They did not just rely on brute strength. They studied their prey, learned its weaknesses, experimented with different methods of attack. One group used fire to drive a pack of razor hounds into a pit lined with sharpened bones. Another set up deadfall traps, dropping entire trees onto creatures whose hides were said to be plasma-resistant. They were evolving faster than the environment could resist them. But the real warning sign came when the humans stopped just hunting and started inviting others to hunt with them. It had started with a challenge. A group of alien warriors, proud and skeptical of humanity's methods, had approached the human hunting leader, a scared woman named Captain Reyes. They had mocked the humans, claiming that their success was a trick, that no true warrior needed fire and traps to bring down their prey. Reyes had simply smiled and handed them weapons. Then let's see what you can do. What followed was a massacre. Jekthar had watched from the safety of an observation drone as the aliens entered the jungle, armed with their traditional weapons. They had tracked a Titan lurker, a monstrous reptilian beast that moved silently despite its size, striking from the treetops with crushing jaws. The warriors had expected a glorious battle. Instead, the Titan lurker had killed half of them in seconds. The remaining warriors had barely managed to wound it before it vanished into the underbrush again, waiting for its next strike. The hunt had turned against them. Jekthar had expected the humans to mock them, to stand back, and let them fail. Instead, Reyes and her hunters had moved in, working with brutal efficiency. They tracked the Titan lurker's movements, used bait to lure it into a clearing, and then ambushed it as a pack, striking at its exposed joints, blinding it, overwhelming it. In less than 5 minutes, the battle was over. The Titan lurker, one of VX-32's most feared creatures, lay dead at Reyes' feet, its thick skull cracked open by a well-placed spear thrust. The humans had never been concerned about proving their strength. They had already known they were the strongest. Instead, they had shown something far more terrifying. They had taught. The surviving alien warriors had stood in stunned silence, their pride shattered. And then, slowly, one by one, they had asked to learn. That was when Jekthar realized what was truly happening. Humanity was not just hunting the predators of VX-32. They were recruiting. Species across the galaxy had always seen the food chain as a rigid structure. Those at the top ruled. Those below survived however they could. But the humans did not see it that way. They did not believe in limits. They were not bound by fear. And now, they were teaching others to think the same way. Jekthar turned away from the screens, his mind racing. If humanity continued like this, the balance of power in the galaxy would shift forever. It was no longer just about survival. It was about who would rule the future. Jekthar stood aboard the command deck of the Galactic Council's warship, staring at the live feeds from VX-32. He had spent weeks watching, analyzing, and dreading what he saw. The humans were no longer just hunters. They were something far worse. They were conquerors without war. The predators of VX-32, once the undisputed rulers of the jungle, had been systematically removed. Their fangs and claws were now decorations hanging from the humans' camps. Their skulls were mounted on walls. Their once feared roars had been replaced by the sound of human laughter, of crackling fires, of the steady rhythm of knives cutting through cooked flesh. And it wasn't just the humans anymore. Other species had begun to change. The same warriors who had once scoffed at humanity's methods now hunted beside them, moving through the jungle like a pack, calculating, adapting, improving. The way they moved was different now. No longer bound by the traditions of their homeworlds, they hunted with the brutal efficiency of the humans. They no longer saw apex predators as monsters to be feared. They saw them as prey. Jekthar clenched his claws, watching as another massive beast, a Titan strider, a creature that once trampled entire battalions, was brought down. The humans had baited it into a ravine, where its massive legs became trapped in the soft mud. Before it could struggle free, a dozen hunters had descended upon it from the trees, stabbing at its joints, slicing through tendons, cutting deep into the exposed flesh beneath its armored plating. It did not stand a chance. The beast let out a final, shuddering breath before collapsing. The humans cheered, but it was not a cheer of desperation, of relief at surviving another day. It was triumph. This was no longer a fight for survival. This was sport. Jekthar exhaled slowly. He had underestimated them. Everyone had. A species that could look at the most terrifying creatures in the galaxy and see nothing but another meal. What else were they capable of? The door behind him slid open. Footsteps echoed across the polished metal floor. A presence loomed beside him. Counselor Vratek, a high-ranking member of the Galactic Council, stood in silence for a moment, watching the same footage. His mandibles clicked together in deep thought. Jekthar did not turn to face him. "You see it now, don't you?" Vratek's voice was calm, but there was a weight to it. "Yes." Jekthar's claws tightened against the console. "They are not like us. They do not fear death as we do. They do not see limits as we do. They kill without hesitation. They eat what should be impossible to eat. They do not simply adapt to a new environment. They bend it to their will." Vratek let out a low hum of agreement, and they are teaching others to do the same. That was the real danger. Not just humanity's raw power, not just their ability to consume the apex predators of the galaxy like it was nothing, but the fact that they shared that ability. Jekthar finally turned to face the counselor. "The balance of power in the galaxy is shifting." Vratek's eyes gleamed with something unreadable. "No," he said softly. "It has already shifted." Silence hung between them. The humans had no need for conquest. They had no need for war. They were already winning.